Next up, we have Emilie Cortes. Emilie is small but mighty. She's a recovering investment professional who was so inspired by her adventures in the big mountains that she decided to make adventure her life's work. She has climbed on 6 of the 7 continents and travels the world spinning tall tales that are all true. The name of her story is The End of the World. Emilie!
Thank you. To say that the sound of an avalanche is like a freight train falling off a cliff is to do this force of nature great injustice. The sound of an avalanche is the sound of the world ending. In 2010, I was invited to join an expedition to Makalu. I've been climbing for about a decade and had put in my dues, and now I thought I was ready. Makalu is the 5th highest mountain on the planet. It lies on the border of Nepal and Tibet, about 15 miles as the crow flies from Everest. It's 27,700 feet high. That's twice as high as South Sister, and add another 7,000 feet. These kinds of mountains are really unique as a climbing objective. They require months, if not years, of physical, mental preparation, logistics, and acquiring the very expensive specialized gear that you need to survive in these environments. They also take a really long time, and there's this general formula that you apply to climbing mountains with extreme altitude. So typically, you'll trek in for like 7 days, 10 days, in some cases even 21 days, just to get to the base of the mountain that you're going to try to climb. And then you'll set up a base camp or advanced base camp, which is basically your new home for a number of weeks or months. In Makalu's case, we trekked for 10 days. The trek nearly killed us. And we lived at advanced base camp, which was 18,500 feet, all told for about 5 weeks. And then you begin the process of basically climbing the mountain multiple times. So in order for the human body to adapt to these really extreme environments and be prepared for the rigors of climbing at high altitude, what you do is do these rotations. So from advanced base camp, you'll climb up to camp 1 and come back down. We call it climbing high and sleeping low because you stress your body by exposing it to the lower levels of available oxygen up high, and you come down and sleep lower where you have a little more oxygen and you're able to recover. Then the next time you might tag camp 1, try to sleep at camp 2, and scurry back on down. And you basically just keep doing that until you have a weather window and you feel strong enough to try to go for the summit. So on Makalu, my partner John and I, we've now accomplished sleeping at camp 2, which is just under 23,000 feet. And the next rotation is to tag camp 2 and try to sleep at camp 3. And I just didn't feel like I was strong enough yet to go straight to camp 2. It was almost 5,000 feet of elevation gain. So again, the South Sister comparison, doing the South Sister hike, but you're starting at 18,500 feet and you're crossing glacier and ice falls. It's a really challenging thing to do. My climbing partner John was known as John Sherpa by the Sherpas because he was so strong. So he could do this in one shot. And I decided, I'm just going to go ahead and go to camp 1 alone. And then John that morning will come up and we'll continue on to camp 2 together. So this is how I decided to go on my solo adventure to camp 1 on Makalu. The morning that I was to set off, there was a lot of snow on the tents and I shook it off and I looked outside and I was like, the weather really doesn't look all that great. Feeling a little nervous about crossing a glacier all by myself. But if I miss this rotation, I'm going to be totally off schedule with the rest of the team. So I should go and give it a shot. Got all my stuff together, and at 10:35 a.m., I go to say goodbye, and John snaps a picture of me and says, "Last seen alive." I was like, dude, that's not funny. So now I'm hiking alone. It's very steep, undulating terrain with lots of loose rock. And I'm completely alone with the sound of my own breathing and nothing else until I cause these little rock slides that make this like clapping sound, the rocks going down and the sound waves reverberating around the features, off the features around me. I can hear little bits of glacial ice popping. and I continue on. The short section of kind of vertical scrambling, and one very hairy traverse where I hug a rock and look down below. And then I'm thankful that I'm on easier terrain, except I look up, and this, I know from previous rotations, is where the glacier tongue hangs and could let loose at any time. So I try to move quickly, or at least as quickly as high altitude will allow me, to get past that section and to what we affectionately called as crampon point. So crampons are these spiky things, much spikier than these heels, that you put on the bottom of your feet so they give your boots purchase in snow and ice. So all of the climbers we'd been stashing are really heavy technical gear. Our boots, our crampons, our harnesses, helmet, ice axe, etc. So we wouldn't have to keep ferrying it back and forth across this section. So there I am, just sitting there alone, very carefully donning all of my technical gear, putting on my harness, putting on my helmet, and getting ready to set across, for the first time in my life, alone on a glacier. I take a deep breath to center myself, and I begin to climb. And I have my ice axe in my uphill hand to try to catch a fall if I fall. And my downhill hand, I've got my trekking pole for balance. And I begin to climb. And there's this fabulous moving meditation aspect of glacier climbing and of high altitude, because you take a step and you breathe and you breathe, and then you take another step and then you breathe and you breathe again, and you do this for hours. So you really got to like it. And finally, I'm starting to see the apex, where the slope is going to angle off, and the weather just gets really weird. The clouds kind of come in, and they're super thin so that the sun's rays are still shining through, but they're reflecting back up at me with radiation, and just creates this crazy convection oven. So all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm stripping off layers. I'm just dying from heat, and I even get down to my t-shirt layer and pull it through the neck so I can like maximize ventilation. And I'm just like stepping and breathing and leaning on my ice axe because I'm exhausted by now climbing in conditions where I feel like I could get heat stroke. And equally as quickly, the clouds then sock in, and now I'm in a whiteout where you can only see a few feet in front of you. And it feels like the temperature instantly plummets, like 50 degrees. So I'm going to drop my pack again and throw all my layers on to try to conserve body heat. And this just keeps happening. Extreme hot, extreme cold, extreme hot, extreme cold, until I reach that apex. Thank frickin' God. And now I have to cross the section where there's a crevasse field. So crevasses on a glacier are these huge cracks that can swallow a climber whole. And at best, if you fall in one, you might die. At worst, you fall and you're still alive, and it's basically an icy grave. If you're not out in a matter of 30 minutes to an hour, you basically will succumb to the cold and die of hypothermia, well aware of what's happening. So my insurance policy had been to establish communication with my climbing partner, John. So I would tell him, this is crevasse number 1, and he would call back and say, copy. So that way at least somebody on this mountain would have some clue where I was. And if I didn't call back on the other side of the crevasse, clear, and he would copy that, he would know I'd probably fallen in. And there was a limited number, there were about 6 crevasses that we had to jump across. So I did that one by one, each time holding my breath and hoping for the best. And finally, after I jump across the last crevasse, and I can see that tent on the horizon, and I know that's my salvation for today, I can finally feel that flood of relief come over me. It's 4:30 p.m. now, and I tell John we should talk again at 6. I make it to the tent, and I start settling into my new home, make myself some delicious dinner of chicken soup and packaged tuna, and boil a couple liters of snow. Now, a lot of people will lose their appetite at altitude, but not me. No. I'm hungry, and everything tastes good. And I'm there just kind of enjoying the solitude and thinking like, wow, for the next 12 hours or so, all I have to do is eat, drink, and pee. It's life reduced to the absolute basics. So at 6, I talk to John again and say, all right, let's schedule to talk at 7 a.m. and we'll see where you're at and what time we'll be meeting to continue on to Camp 2. And I say, I love you, John. And he goes, this is an official channel, so I cannot respond in kind. So I failed to mention that my climbing partner was also my emotionally unavailable boyfriend. So I said goodnight, and that was the last time that I speak to John. And just as I'm starting to settle back into that almost deafening silence up there, I hear this huge clap like thunder right on top of me. And the sound of a roar, the sound of a freight train falling off of a cliff. And I dash over to the side of the tent and open it and look out, and I see these huge Serac avalanche, all of these huge chunks of ice coming down the cliff, falling right where I had been just a few hours before. And my heart is pounding. It's almost like I can hear it. I can't hear anything else. But I know that for the moment, I'm safe because we think we place this tent in a safe zone, unless something catastrophic happens. So just about the time that my heart was starting to come back into my chest and re-merge with the silence, I hear another huge clap, but this time it's coming from behind me. So I dash back over and open the tent and look around, but this time I can't see anything. A whiteout has closed in again, and I have no idea if that avalanche is coming for me or not. And I can't run, because I can't see where I would be going. And I just sit there and I wait, and I hear the roar coming, and then it stops. And I realize I'm a sitting duck, that this is probably just the beginning, because all of that temperature variation during the day has really loosened things up. And I start to debate internally, well, what do I do? Obviously, odds are not good if I stay here, but the odds may be worse if I leave. It's going to get dark soon. There's a whiteout. I can't see where I'm going. No one will know that I was planning on leaving the tent, and if they don't find me and I've fallen in a crevasse, they'll probably never find me. So I weigh the odds, none of which are good, and I decide to stay. Now, if you've never felt primal fear, it's really difficult to describe. I basically just laid there stiff as a board, and I could feel the adrenaline passing through all of my veins. And all of my senses were on fire, and I could hear every little glacial pop and think that that was going to be the next one that was coming. I ended up putting on my helmet because I thought, well, it won't save me in a chance of a direct hit, but if there's a stray chunk of ice, maybe I'll have a small chance of getting through it. And I wrote in my journal, and I described what had happened through the day and what's happening now. And I write, John, if you ever do have the chance to read this, I really do love you. I really didn't think I was going to make it through that night. But I will tell you that I've never been the same with experiencing fear or risk after that night. And life has felt completely different. You will be changed if you ever hear the sound of the end of the world for yourself.